So I'm really excited to talk a little bit about one of my favorite software's approach, or one of my favorite companies' approach to building software. Just a little bit of a preface. I'm Austin Karren. I'm one of the co-founders of Event Penguin, and been building Event Penguin for a couple years now. Recently, we released version 2 of our registration platform for Event Penguin. So we made a big shift and just really awesome enhancement to the user experience of the existing registration app. And after reading how Linear builds their software, that actually heavily influenced both my decision to kind of rewrite Event Penguin's registration system and also my approach to building that kind of software. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what they do with building software. There's going to be a couple hot takes. We'll have some time for discussion. So, we hope that everyone's excited to hear a little bit about this. To anyone who's watching this on recording, feel free to leave comments on what your thoughts are. But yeah, okay. Just going to jump right into it. So Linear, they're a company that believes software should be magical. This quote here says, "At Linear, we believe software can feel magical. Quality of software is driven by both the talent of its creators and how they feel when they're crafting it." Completely agree. So today I want to talk about a hot take, one of my favorite ones that Linear has a blog post on, and it's write issues, not user stories. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means in a second. Okay, sorry, just trying to get my slides figured out. Okay, so here's the big thing with Linear. So Linear actually doesn't believe in stories. Well, rather, they don't believe in user stories, which are a common pattern for developing software, especially developed by Atlassian and Jura. And they actually think they're an anti-pattern in product development. So they think that you should write short and simple issues that describe the task that you're doing in plain language instead. The point of writing an issue is to communicate a task, and it needs to be clear enough that the assignee can perform it. It needs to give enough context so that teammates know they know how to understand what work is being done. So the goal of writing issues should be to do this as effectively as possible. Okay, so we're going to talk about why user stories are obsolete. User stories evolved around 30 years ago as a better way to communicate to a customer the product requirements that software needs to be delivered. So fast forward to today, a lot of things have changed in how we build software. Customers are a lot more tech savvy, and they know enough to articulate some basic product requirements. We've developed some pretty common standards for common features, such as charts, to-do lists, and notifications, so there's no need to explain how they work. The best product and engineering teams understand their users deeply and are familiar with how the product should work. So user stories have kind of become a cargo cult ritual that feel good, but they waste a lot of resources and time. So they're a roundabout way to describe a task. They obscure the work that needs to be done. My main issue with user stories is that they're very time consuming to write. As a kind of like a product manager of sorts for my company, as well as an engineer, they're very time consuming to write, and they can silo engineers into a mechanical role where they code to the issue's requirements instead of thinking about user experience. So yes. Sorry, did someone raise their hand?
Nope, just welcoming Jeffrey in and catching him up where you're at, but you can continue.
Okay, awesome. Welcome, Jeffrey. We're talking about some hot takes, specifically why Linear, the company that makes a issue management software, thinks user stories are obsolete. So this is going to be a bit of a spicy one, but hope you enjoy it. So yeah, we were just talking about how user stories are a bit time consuming to write. They talk a little bit about they silo engineers into requirements instead of thinking about the whole product holistically. Uh, Another reason that user stories are complicated is that they're difficult to scope because you should be thinking of things on a product level, and often user story doesn't encompass the entire product. And it doesn't really match how we communicate about software in real conversations. So those are the main issues with user stories. But we'll get a little bit more into that. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about the better way to write issues. In my opinion, it's better to write clear, simple issues that describe tasks in plain language. It's also good to write your own issues to discuss the user experience at a product and feature level, not a task level. And instead of spending time creating user stories, spend it talking to customers and thinking through features before building them. This was a big one for us with Event Penguin registration. The first version we built was functional, but there was a lot of user feedback that we got, and users wanted different behaviors. They wanted a cleaner checkout flow. They wanted it to be one tap experience. So there were a lot of things that we reconsidered because of all the user feedback we got from the first iteration. So it's good to think on a product level sometimes instead of just a task level. Like, how can we improve this component, this user story for this button? Instead, we're thinking more holistically, how does this product work as a whole, and what do users think of it? Okay, gonna move on to next one. So the next point they make is to describe concrete tasks or problems. An issue should describe a task with a clear, defined outcome. There should be a piece of code, design document, or action to be taken. If it's not a task, then it doesn't really belong in an issue tracker. That's another hot take. But let's say maybe it's a product idea that needs to be fleshed out in a document or a conversation for a larger feature that should be broken down into smaller pieces of work. If those are the case, I think it's good to kind of define those as projects. Of course, there's exceptions to this rule. For example, you might have a task that you need to do before working on a feature that require either a design or like a specific technical approach. So it can be helpful to create placeholder issues in those instances. An example would be like explore design for this component, or you could frame it as a deliverable, like write this product spec for this thing or for that thing. Those can be quite helpful, just so you can track your progress on exploring designs, writing product specs, those kind of things. Okay, the next point to make is writing clearly and directly. So they say, write short and simple issue titles that directly state what the task is. The title should be easy to scan, since since most people will read it on a list or a board in the context of other issues. I totally agree with that. One of my issues with user stories is you end up with just these crazy titles that are not scannable on a table. Descriptions should be optional, not required, and they should include relevant thoughts or content. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to move things around a little bit. So When you're sharing a feature request or a bug report, I also think it's important to quote user feedback directly instead of summarizing it. Often customers describe pain more authentically than you could summarize it. So it's faster to copy and paste as well, or link to an existing uh, link that you might have with your customer service solution. And it's just more easy to get it that way. Okay, this next one is write your own issues. So everyone on the team should write their own issues. I'm going to talk a little bit about our experience in our team. So before, when we were using Jira and writing user stories, as the product manager, I would write all the user stories. And that took up a considerable amount of time, to the point of where I was no longer really having much time to do dev myself. I was spending most of my day just writing out issues. The other thing is there was often a disconnect between the understanding of how to write those issues, or how those issues worked, and what I put in. So a common request I got from my team was, hey, you need to put more information, more context into these user stories. We're not really understanding. And so it often became planning, like daily planning sessions were often just filled with me filling out more data for the team so that they could have a better idea of what we were supposed to do. And it took up a lot of time. So in my opinion, it's faster and easier for the person who understands the issue that needs to be worked on to also write those issues. So it sets your team up to do a better job. When you write your own issues, it forces you to think through the problem at a deep level. So you're no longer just thinking, you know, what is this user story? Hey, I need more information. Give me more information. You actually think about the product again a bit more holistically. And you have to think through each task you create for yourself. I'm going to take a quick pause here. Does anyone have any thoughts, hot takes so far before I continue on?
Yeah, I remember when I've been around long enough to remember when, user stories became a thing.
Yeah.
And it seems like back then, the general idea that product managers had was that people were technology averse. They didn't understand technology. And so you had to dumb down everything to a story about a user. And I mean, this was really honestly, before we even had ubiquitous internet, before people had mobile phones. Right now, there's generations of people who've grown up with technology that understand technology. So I think it makes sense. It may make sense sometimes still to describe in general, a story of a user. But I think as far as just, project management goes, I don't know that they're necessary every time anymore. It seems like we could just kind of describe a task and get it done.
Yeah, that's super true. One thing that I like that you said is there might be exceptions. So as you're doing your product management, you might always find exceptions for things. Sometimes I find myself continuing to write issues as if they're user stories, and that might just because it's a more complicated issue that needs to be solved. I have found though that it's better to do that by creating smaller sub issues that fit into milestones, um, which all work within linear software, of course. But often you can kind of break user stories down into smaller pieces and say, okay, this is a task, that's a task, and these all need to get marked off before we complete this milestone. Um, so user stories, they also create a space to come up with better approaches that make it easier to spot shortcuts or missing parts in a plan. The practice of writing your own issue also reframes how you approach your work entirely. Instead of building to mark a task done or a checklist of requirements, you focus on the product or project deliverable, which is really cool. So again, we're focused on milestones, like how does this product work to the user instead of, how does this issue work? Did I make the button the correct color of green? You're focused less on that and more on, did I deliver what the customer was asking for? So in some cases, it does make sense to write issues for other people. So one of those situations where I think it's useful to write issues for other people is like bug reports. We do that a lot here on our team. And I think it should be encouraged because those issues are written slightly differently. When you're writing an issue like a bug report, you can frame it as an ask, and you can kind of describe the problem. And then you can let the assignee come up with the solution and then write the issue as a task. So that's always really helpful to me. Like there might be a bug report. You can link an issue to that bug report that is that task that the engineer created with their own solution to solve that problem. So you're not prescribing solutions necessarily all the time with bug reports. You might just say, here's what it is, and we can talk about the product holistically. And as a team, what do we think we should do here to solve this issue? And oftentimes they can come up with the solution themselves. Engineers are really smart. So they can come up with those solutions and create issues that link to that bug report. So yeah, sometimes it does make sense to write issues for other people. All right. So another point is to keep user experience discussions at the product level. So Linear says, discuss the customer experience at the product level when you spec out projects and build your roadmap. I think that's pretty huge because now instead of just thinking from, again, like a very small scope, a user story of like, what does this component or button do? You're thinking a bit more holistically about how it affects your overall product. And then you could build it as a project that your team can collaborate on. And you can make it as part of your roadmap. So you can know, okay, this 2-week cycle, we're going to focus on building out this specific project. And you can even have leaders of the projects. And if you look at some of the other linear method blog posts, they talk about letting team members take turns being in charge of projects. So it gives engineers and team members the opportunity to grow and to learn how to all think about the product holistically and to kind of take turns burdening that, shouldering that burden and that responsibility of being in charge of projects. So that's something we've been trying to engage with a little bit more about in Event Penguin, having certain engineers be in charge of different pieces or different like vertical slices of a project has just been a huge win. The other thing is that it's important to engage the full team in conversations that involve changing the product. So that means designers, engineers, customer-facing folks like Kylie, who talks to our customers a lot. It's important that everyone is in there so that they can understand the user's needs, the limitations, and the product requirements. Because often, designers, user-facing people, engineers, we all have different understandings on how the user needs are met, on what limitations we have, and how product requirements work. So it's important to involve everyone in a team or a vertical slice to talk about that as we create a project together. And then the next part of that is to delegate the work out to project teams. that you expect the deliverable to be. So what that looks like is a team would be picked to work on a certain project. And then as a team, you talk about the necessary milestones that you need for that project, help everyone get like a deep understanding of that, maybe document a little bit. You could write some Google Docs or some kind of like more holistic overviews. And then you assign out as the product leader, you assign out people to help you work on certain milestones and have each person start creating their own tasks. So everyone gets running and is thinking about solving the problem. And then, so yeah, you delegate the work that you expect people to deliver. And now everyone understands the user experience intuitively. So there's no need to clarify it at a task level. And, you know, as you collaborate, it's more about how does this work with what the other engineers or designers are working on. So it helps you keep your product discussions more useful instead of just running around in circles with user stories. So wanted to take another pause. Any questions, thoughts?
I was just going to say, I love the idea of to build good software, you have to involve everyone. It's not just the engineers, it's every aspect of the product and making sure everyone's on the same page. That's been our, you know, our biggest follies when we don't do that is it creates a lot of misunderstanding and we can't get things done as effectively or efficiently, or we build the wrong thing and the user doesn't like it. So I think making sure that every person knows exactly what you're building is a really awesome perspective to keep, and a good thing for us all to be thinking about as we're building software. That's what makes the experience magical.
Yeah, totally agree. You know, it's important to remember that no one's perfect at this. We had a feature we were working on with a team where I did not do a great job talking about how we wanted things to work on a product level with the team. Just made some assumptions, thought everyone would know what's going on, and we stumbled a little bit. We were like, okay, that took us a little bit longer to get done because I, as a product manager, failed to talk about the user experience at a product level. So it is really important to take the time to do that, to make sure that everyone understands, you know, what we're going for, and then it makes it easier to collaborate as well. So really big point. So just wanted to end with a little quick quote from Linear. They say, how we work at Linear, we discuss a feature or project deeply before deciding on an implementation plan. The project owner writes specs and gathers feedback until we have, or we feel like we have the right approach. And then only then do we start writing code. It's not uncommon to take a couple of weeks to think about a feature before building it. But once we've come up with the right plan, it's straight into execution mode. The project owner delegates the work, starting with individuals writing up their own issues. So it's a really cool approach to writing software. And it's, you know, I think it's a unique perspective. Personally, I don't think that, you know, the linear approach to building software is the only approach, but it is a very interesting perspective on building software. And it's cool to see how, you know, a product manager platform that's pretty up and coming, very popular in the software developing world, chose to build their software. So I love the some of the posts that they have here. We're gonna share the link to the Linear Method website that Linear provides, and we'll also share these slides for anyone that wants them. So if you want them, let us know. You can just give us your email and we will email you these slides as well. But yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for showing up and being here to learn a little bit more about some cool approaches to build software.
I think one of the coolest takeaways with the linear method, or like you said, any method you can use to build software, is just that like when we have implemented these things, it has made our process so much more simple at Event Penguin. And we do really believe in building things as a team and utilizing everyone's talents. And I think the linear method has definitely impacted the way that we've built Event Penguin and how we want to build our community. So I think that's pretty awesome. Thanks for everything you shared, Austin.
Love it. Okay, any other thoughts or things before we close off?
Yeah, I've been building, software in various, startups and companies for 25 years, and started to feel a few years ago that the to some degree the idea of agile software development got a little bit hijacked, and the original idea I think was really good, but I think what Jira and some of the other companies have done with it um, have evolved into something that doesn't necessarily always result in the right outcomes, especially if you're trying to be super kind of iterative and agile. And then we've seen companies that aren't necessarily just software companies like Tesla and SpaceX go to an extreme agile approach to the point where they're willing to blow up rockets just to do iterations. I mean, if you want to talk about like iterating in the wild, if you think about SpaceX, they'll just kind of say, here's the objectives for this flight and let's go. I mean, obviously they've done a ton of thinking, a ton of engineering, a ton of building, but they'll fly the rocket and then, figure out what needs to be improved for the next flight and fly another one. And there's just a lot of people that really don't understand that. They think that, why did they just waste a rocket or whatever? But what they don't realize is that process of being extremely agile and extremely iterative has led to better rockets. And I think how this relates to maybe the linear method and newer methodologies is kind of continued innovation on the software development lifecycle of how do we quickly iterate on software. What's a simpler, more practical way to do the project management and the product management of said software? And then, one of the things that we're working on here at Nerd, in addition to that, is just how do we know transparency around what software developers and builders are actually doing and what's the impact of their work. And so I actually see kind of continued evolution of software development lifecycle trends. I think the linear method is really exciting and interesting evolution of kind of the agile approach, getting down to a more simple, practical way to iterate. And then I think what we'll see in the coming years on top of that is systems that provide more transparency on what developers are actually doing and kind of quantifying their work, like what we're doing with Perspect here at Nerd. But Austin, this is great. It's great to learn more about the linear method. Excited about what you guys are doing at Event Penguin. Thanks for sharing some thoughts and kind of surfacing this topic today.
Awesome. Yeah, that's been super insightful. Again, just to plug Perspect, that's one of the really awesome products that Nerd United just came out with. So give it a look. It was #2 on Product Hunt for its day, and it's been just killing it. So go ahead and check that out. Want to plug that. Huge friends of the people at Nerd. And yeah, just wanted to say thank you everyone for being here and listening and taking part in the conversation. We've been Event Penguin. And again, thank you so much for being here.